What's up, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Ruben, and today we're going to be playing some of the Versus series that we're doing. It's a new series where we basically invite one of the gentlemen and we fight them. We fight them in a best of 3 with some of the top decks, and today we have Swim. What's up, Swim?
Oh, hello, Ruben. Yeah, right. So we're going to be playing the John Calveit deck versus Henselt deck today for you. It's a matchup that is actually, it seems like Henselt would have a major upper hand because the promote shuts down Calveit's ability to steal spies, but it's actually a much more balanced and nuanced matchup than it might seem. Ready to get into it?
So I'm basically going to be playing the Henselt deck, and this is arguably one of the best decks out there. It's definitely top tier. It can win against so many decks right now. It's doing very well on ladder, and it's basically comboing together with getting a lot of value in different rounds, but especially like it has a great combo potential and can get a ton of points in certain rounds when you can really go for it, and especially round 1 is one of them. So this deck just has great potential. Everyone knows the Henselt deck, so I'm not gonna delay this any further. So why don't you explain your deck real short?
Yeah. So the Calveit deck is obviously it uses John Calveit. You're going to be using Operator and Cantarella. One of the main tenets of this deck is you have Alzur's Double Cross to really increase the reliability of your Operator-Cantarella combo. Because if nothing else, you can Alzur's Double Cross out Cantarella if you didn't draw her, pulling her back with Calveit at 3 more strength buffed by the ADC. Then you've got the Operator, which is the ADC's second choice, since it's the second highest unit in the deck. So if you've got Cantarella and ADC in your hand, ADC will effectively double as a second way to get your Operator out. And it's a really, really powerful combo that just has almost no answer in terms of like the consistency and reliability of taking round 1 easily. And one of the Nilfgaard's biggest problems in the past has been just finding the power for round 3. Like every faction has a round 3 planetary Nilfgaard, so this deck uses combat engineers to preemptively set up a round 3, and also Regis in a specific variant.
Yeah, so we'll be hopping right into the games, but before we do, let me just explain the format. We're going to be doing a best of 3, and we're going to be explaining our choices we make, basically, or small choices. We're not going to be giving away too much information, but we will talk a little bit about stuff in our hand. But the major thing we want to achieve here is basically explaining how to play on a high level, and actually so you can follow or design or decision making.
Yeah, this is just a showcase match. We're just showing off this match. I think it's, like I said before, I think it's one of the most nuanced matches in the entire game on both ends, because you have to make really, really important decisions about, as the Calveit player, how to play your spies, and as the Henselt player, like how far do you want to let them get their spies before you lay down your promotes, which are a really limited resource.
Yeah, I agree. It's basically, you can say it counters the spies totally, but it's so limited. Your research, how many times you can use Henselt, of course, is only once, and promote is it's so valuable, and you have to care for all the removal that that Nilfgaard has too. So there's a lot of uses for promote here.
Yep, just getting my mulligan sorted out.
So my mulligan is pretty straightforward here. Just trying to set up the first round. Seems like a very...
With this faction, you generally want to mulligan very aggressively towards blacklisting. You want to get rid of your bronzes because you want to get rid of almost whichever bronzes blacklist for more value. Because, quite simply, you'll find that you have just good access to whatever bronzes you end up needing with your emissaries anyway. So you go full-on blacklisting, trying to draw that combo out, because the combo is just, it's really hard to answer. Alright, so this Raw Tosser put a lot of pressure on him. It forced him to promote early, and yeah, so if I hadn't deshackled there, he would have promoted, and you could say that the Kylocarcass gives him an extra body there, and, you know, it just gives him points, but at the same time, it forces him to promote effectively 2 units in a turn that he doesn't really want to.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to set up a nice promote here to actually deny the Kylocarcass, but getting this lock on the reinforced siege tower really disables my first turn and will make it a lot
yeah.
weaker. And now
It's very bad. He's in a super awkward situation because he has a choice here. His choice is to let that tower die. The problem is it dies at the end of his turn, which means I have first grabs on it. Very, very vulnerable to a Vicovara medic potentially sniping out a tower that he might not have a way to reverse scout back out at that point, because I'll be able to take it. Or alternatively, I mean, he just has no real way to block that. Or he could promote right now, but then he loses the value out of that tower.
Yeah, and I decided my promote is worth too much, so I'm gonna play something else and ignore the tower. It's really vulnerable to a Vicom Paramedic, and I hope you don't have one. That's basically my only grasp I have right now.
Yep, I didn't end up having a Vicom Medic. In fact, in this specific variant, I'm running 0, although some variants run between, well, anywhere between 0 and 2.
So
that's one of the situations where they're very dominant in round 1.
So I'm gonna play my Field Medic, obviously, to get it out. I still don't know that he doesn't have a Vicovaro Medic, so obviously I want to get that out as fast as possible. That's a roach. That's not the best target to have, but yeah, it's alright.
It happens sometimes. It's a very unfortunate kind of essentiality with this deck. Roach's value is kind of too hard to ignore, but at the same time, Joachim's is as well. And it's really hard to commit to round 1 in a situation where you don't draw a gold you feel like you can use proactively, and if you do get a little unlucky and end up pulling out Roach with Joachim.
I will use this opportunity to cast Promote. This is a perfect setup. I will make use of it. Getting Roach off the deck, getting this huge point advantage is basically... you can't let that one slip out of your hands, basically. So he plays Cantarella, which is a sign to me that basically he's kind of signing to me, alright, you have this round, you have enough points. He probably has to spend 2 or 3 cards to get ahead in this round, so this is a very safe way to pass. Of course, he has John Calveit, but I got bamboozled. It's still equal though, so he'll be down 1 card. This is the effect. If you're not used to playing against this deck, it's just... that one turn combo can be huge, and it is huge. And if you don't really calculate it and you go over it too fast, you will make the mistake I just made.
Yep. And you generally want to hold off on playing Regis in round 1, but at the same time, if you have an opportunity to take it there reliably while putting value into the next round, just by taking it with his gold body, that's definitely a solid move.
Yeah, that was actually... I had a good advantage there and I let it slip, so that was really bad on my part. I had a really good first round there. But John Calveit, his swing potential is amazing, as we just saw.
Right.
He is down
so
1 card though.
Here I find myself almost in an awkward situation, because I ended up having to pull my ADC pull my Cantarella through ADC, which means I'm not able to operator it. So I find myself with my combo bisected. The go-to here is to use Operator on either Ambassador or Joachim de Wet. Ambassador is a slightly risky proposition for him to use, because if he ends up hitting one of my Spies, he could easily lose to a Treason, or possibly even a Kahir resetting my faction ability.
Yeah, so I play Priscilla there because I basically want to have... If he decides to pass very early, I want to have a very good revive target if I have a potential to revive card in my next turns, because reviving is one of the things Northern Realms can do in the 3rd turn, which make him really, really strong, because the 3rd turn is a really important and vital turn, and he's trying to set that up now. That's my assumption at least, and having a good revive target is crucial to actually catching up to that potential that he's now going to gain.
Yep. And I find myself in a really, really asymmetrical situation. He's got an ambassador that he's scared of playing because if it pulls an emissary, he could really, really just lose an insane amount of value to a treason or a Kakir. Additionally, my ambassadors are doing more for me since I've got combat engineers. And I can kind of bleed him out a little bit here. We'll see me playing ambassadors. If I'm lucky, I might hit the same unit twice. I'm not scared of Igni, because the standard Henselt list omits the Igni for Bork, or rather, Phil and Trenmarth.
Yeah. Now, I just feel like he is bleeding me out, even when I'm behind, which is a really bad position to be in. I want to be ahead, so he plays the last card and I can just safely pass, and I'm currently not in that position, so I'm really looking for a way to get in that position. But I don't want to waste all my good resources for turn 3, so we have to be careful on what we play here.
Yep. Very much so. I mean, you have the opportunity to use Vanilla Yennefer if you have it to stay ahead, but it's a very committal way of doing that. And the thing about like trying to stay ahead of me right now is that I honestly wouldn't recommend doing it because, I mean, for the most part, I have combat engineers. I mean, you know I've got combat engineers, which means while I'm ahead of you right now, I'm about to slow it down, and I don't feel comfortable passing until I've played them. Regardless of, you know, I mean, you can always expect combat engineers in a Nilfgaard deck, especially when I'm playing the way I am, which is playing the operator down, selecting the ambassador, and just buffing my own units. So you definitely, in the Henselt's position here, you shouldn't feel pressured to stay ahead of my score because, A, if you do, then you might be in a position where you're forced to, like I'm going to change the tempo by playing 1 or 2 combat engineers, and then you might be forced to do that as well if you even have an option to.
Yeah.
So I have an interesting choice here. I can play a very vital card in this matchup to force a pass, but it might not be. But I think I will. It's very enforcing right now, and it's gonna be very threatening if he doesn't have the resources to actually get rid of this or to deal with this. He might have it, of course, but if he didn't, it's pressuring him immediately in a very direct way.
No, yeah, I certainly don't. I think it's rare for a deck like this to run more than a 1 of Dimeridium Shackles, which I've already used on, I think, turn 3. So at this point, I mean, I couldn't have passed there since he was ultimately ahead with the trebuchets going off. If that wasn't the case, I might have been looking to do that. But here, I'm looking to instead just get value out of 1 of my 2 combat engineers. I had 2 in hand. And you can only send 1 back with the Nilfgaard passive, so I need to get value out of at least this one so that I can send the other one back. And the Bork isn't going to go off yet. Like, if he passes when I do, then I've still got an extra turn.
And I played this card. I feel really bad for playing it, because it gives the potential, of course, to kill my own unit, and it's very dangerous, but I feel like my other cards are so vital that I cannot use them. Luckily, he is passing and I'm gonna be ahead, so that won't happen. If it actually hit the Regis Higher Vampire twice, it would have been kind of catastrophic. But yeah, that didn't happen, so I'll just pass and we'll head on into the most final round.
Yep, and he's a card up on me, but I have the 22 power units sticking on this board, and it might end up growing a little stronger too. Not looking great for me. The villain Trenmarth there forced out a lot of my potential. I was really, really trying to get a bigger carryover because that's this deck's kind of win condition. It's playing round 2 in a way that almost guarantees round 3. This is very concerning, actually.
I'm also not in a good position. I decided not to play an extra card to kill this 22 strength because I valued my 1 card more in the ultimate end of my round 3 plan or combo that I'm planning right now. If it gets disrupted, it's gonna be very catastrophic. But if it doesn't, it might prove to be the right decision, and I hope it will, of course, but it might have been the wrong decision.
So I feel in my situation as if normally, you don't mind giving them extra units to promote with the cow carcasses, and you enjoy the pressure that provides, but in such a distinctly different scenario, I feel like I'm just achieving really, really no pressure by really putting it in the siege rail. So I'm electing to put it in the range rail here, just to basically play it as an 8-point play, since it'll buff my Imperial Brigade a little bit.
So I basically made that other decision because, of course, I have Henselt. It would have given me a direct bonus and a direct protection, but I decided to go with the other option, which is ultimately going to be much better in the long run. So I will Henselt here. This is an obvious choice. You basically give yourself a load of points, and you give yourself the protection of those units, which cannot be dealt with right now. And this is going to be difficult for the Nilfgaard player here.
Yep. And you'll note, of course, I ended up, if I had ended up putting the cow carcass on the siege rail here, it ultimately would have just given him another gold body, which would have been quite bad.
Of course, I'm buffing here units like a cow carcass that are gonna disappear, so these aren't kind of fake points that will disappear right now. It's actually very close right now. It will all depend on this last card here.
Yep. I had the treason going in late, and that's a bit of a tell that I had that since I had the agitator instead of the companion, but ultimately it's just not enough.
No, holding the Manticore Venom proved very valuable. Actually, one of the game-changing thoughts might have been not killing or not playing that extra card for the Borg. Some people might have gone for that decision. It might have turned out well, but you never know, and turn 3 is so vital, especially with Henselt. You really need to get a combo, because if you only have 3 cards to work with, you don't have a lot to do with cards. You saw that now I had a lot more cards to play with, and I needed every single one of them to actually win that game. But yeah, it could have gone. We obviously don't know the result of that, so
I definitely agree with the early Borg decision. You could have even used it a little bit early there, even. But it's a very good way to force out the Calveit player in this case by really pressuring around 2 in the way that his win condition kind of dictates he has to.
So I lost. I actually made some mistakes, like the early Calveit. That's something, if you're not used to playing against that deck, which it doesn't see too much play on the ladder. You don't see it too often, but even though it's a really fun deck and quite a competitive deck, it's you can really get it can swing you by. You just don't see it happening. You think I'm so much ahead, and suddenly the difference, all your point difference is just gone, and you really need to watch out for that. And once you actually play versus it, I guess you'll learn it and you'll never fall for that trick again, but still.
Yeah, one of my early mistakes might have been the way I used D-Shackles on your Siege Tower early on. It's a very powerful card in that matchup because it has applications on, you can use it to lock down the Villain Treadmirth, which is a huge card in this matchup, as many others. And I just have no way of dealing with it without the D-Shackles left over.
Yeah, indeed. And yeah, you need to save against this matchup. I think Bork is the decider, and if you can deal with Bork, you probably can win even 2 rounds in a row, because Bork is just such a pressing factor in this matchup, in most matchups, to be honest. And so yeah, placing that on my siege row, which is of course the right decision to make, and it just pressures me into my decision making right now.
Yeah, I mean, the Henselt deck famously has almost no proactive plays that don't feed into this Raw Tosser. It's very, very... Don't feel bad about preemptively putting down a Raw Tosser on their siege rail. There's really nothing wrong with that, because it just... The earlier you put down the pressure, the better, honestly.
It's actually... I have to totally agree with that. It's one of the most disabling plays that can happen, because it's kind of decreasing the turn or the timer by 1 because you play it that preemptively, and there's almost nothing I can do with it other than sacrificing a unit, which is very terrible, and it doesn't feel good at all. But
Yeah, it's a deck that's specifically very, very vulnerable to this specific strategy, and this will come up a lot in this mirror.
Yeah, that is actually very terrifying, and it's so he's giving me Cantarella, which obviously gives me some information.
We've got the operator combo coming down this time. I was unfortunate enough to have it last time, or to not have it last time specifically. And it's honestly, I mean, having this combo or not is going to dictate just how much power this deck is able to put out. Because having the second Cantarella that you can steal back that they can't is just a very, very big deal for what this deck can do. Wow, very early promote. Was that face down?
No. Yeah, it's I mean, that was kind of what I was going for. Stuff was gonna die, and I decided to play Priscilla to dig for the promote specifically, and I did found it. Was quite lucky. If I didn't find it, I would have thrown away something else. It would have been Priscilla that would have died, so it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but I still decided to take that promote. I could have done something else, but if it was a medic, it would have I would have lost that value.
Yep. Priscilla is a really tricky card to use. I mean, you have to really leverage your probabilities with a card like that. Absolutely.
Yeah, now that she's actually gotten the face down buff nerf, it's pretty big. You have to take risks sometimes with her, and sometimes it's risks you don't really like taking. That's pretty huge there. That's actually getting quite scary.
Yep. Yeah, and already, I mean, like I said, the Bork is a really, really strong card in this matchup, but ultimately it can only be used once and not in every circumstance at all. Like, there are many ways in which, many situations in this matchup, specifically this one, that an Igni might be preferable. But, of course, Bork is just going to do so much more for you in other matchups.
I'm just actually really struggling right now because I have limited tools to deal with. I can basically decide, do I go for the bigger combo? Do I go for the bigger turn, the longer term that Henselt always had trouble with in the past, but kind of solved it right now? Do you want to go for that? I mean, because if he decides to pass early, it's lost potential.
I mean, it'd be a good way to test the waters to see exactly how.
I feel comfortable putting a Cantarella down, not giving him a third unit to promote. So he can choose to promote this Cantarella here. He locks me out of the Cantarella and the Emissary, but he only picks up 2 promote targets, and he knows I've got 1 other Cantarella and maybe a Joachim and maybe other Bronze Spies coming out. So this is where you have to really, really consider whether it's worth your using your promote or whether you have to be really, really conservative with them.
This is a very annoying play because he was totally in a position to play something like this. He was ahead enough, and it's yeah, this puts him ahead in so many ways because right now he's technically, he can use John Calveit to get a lot of strength back, and I'm just here having to make hard decisions while he's actually totally executing his gameplay that he always wants to execute. But I will decide to actually play my own Cantarella in this case.
Alright. I'm going to slow it down a little bit here. I want to start putting value into future rounds because, honestly, I don't want to be too vulnerable to a pass. I feel like I'm in a dominant position, and therefore I feel like I shouldn't have to win round 1, even 1 card down, without a proper investment into the next round. This deck is in large ways about carryover. You don't really want to lose these big buffed units, and even in the eventuality that I do carry this over, I still might have my other combat engineer carrying it into round 3 for me. So it's always good to have big bodies on round 2. And this deck is generally very confident that it can win round 1. This deck, what it really, really excels at is just winning round 1 super reliably, ultimately.
I did decide to play my promote there, mainly because it disables him of using Calveit on my range throw, which is gonna be pretty big because that's a huge swing that I kind of want to avoid. It also buffs my siege tower, of course, and it gets me ahead. And of course, what I expected him to play was to play the other Cantarella, which It's pretty scary. You'd think, oh, he's so much ahead, but Calveit just disables that completely. And
Yep. Right now, my Calveit would be, even though it's not picking up these gold buffs, it would be swinging for 22 points right now.
Yep.
So if he passes, I press one button and I'm ahead. And that's what this deck is all about. It's all about that round one reach. It's all about that gigantic threat of, like, you know, putting value into future rounds, waiting for the pass, and then just pressing the button, basically. And it's very, very terrifying if it can get that combo, and if it's not in a matchup that's really, really disastrous. Right now, there's only one matchup that this deck just has a really, really hard time against. That is the Consume Monsters matchup, because you just always find your units being eaten there.
so I decided to play Yennefer here because it would give me the edge. Especially with my siege tower here, of course, but it is still quite close. Right now, his Calveit swings for 36, 40. It's even more. So it's stacking up, and it's getting scary, and his unit is getting buffed, and it's going into the next round, and he just played another one, which is very scary.
And of course, even though he promoted them, locking them out of Calveit, those two gold ones are still giving this one a little bit of extra strength. You'll note my positioning there on the emissaries, which is specifically to avoid letting him get a super value promote. If he wants to lock down my Cantarella while locking down any of my emissaries as well, he will have to use his Henselt, which is a big button to force out of him, really.
Yeah, and the Henselt button is the only thing I have left. The reason I played promote on this Cantarella and this emissary was basically I still have Henselt left. But if I am forced to use Henselt in this round, it's gonna be disastrous. So basically, what I just did by playing Prince Tennis is forcing him to play Calveit, which brings him ultimately ahead. Something I impossibly can catch up with unless I play something like Bork, but it would be too much setup because if I play Bork now, he will pass and he will let me play the full 3 turns, and yeah, I will be destroyed. I will be ruined. So the best thing I can do is pass, because I cannot catch up with this at all. He's down 1 card, which is one small advantage for me. There's nothing I can do against this.
Yep. And I've just got that big carryover, laying down that combat engineer early, just really, really assures that I'm going to get that off, because, you know, you could have passed it an earlier time, and it's just, I was always ready for the pass there. As soon as you had an opportunity where it was looking like it was going to be just the round being given up. Ultimately, like, when this deck has its resources, it's just so hard to outmatch that value in round 1.
So now what I'm mainly scared of is another combat engineer. If he has that, that's pretty scary. But he'll need to set it up, of course, and I will definitely try and make use of that. His advantage is so big right now that I am forced to play my villain Tretamurph, which annoys me because, of course, my roach hits the wrong row. It forces me to play villain Tretamurph, because if he decides to pass at any moment, he plays a combat engineer and then decides to pass, I have to play 2 or 3 cards, which is having a negative card advantage like that is just destructive.
Yeah, it really can be quite massive.
How are you?
And that's a really good poem. He only has 1 combat engineer or 2 in his hand. That's what I'm assuming, at least, and what I'm kind of hoping for. They will, in best case scenario, get destroyed if he doesn't have his shackles. He hasn't used it, of course. There is that possibility. If he has it, it's gonna be a tough matchup, because his full round was basically perfect.
Very much so. And the roach actually served a pretty good purpose there, blocking your trebuchet from the inevitable cow carcass.
The treason comes out there, and that's 70 value, or 69 now. And it's in a second round with only playing about 3 or 4 cards it's absolutely insane. If you can actually set up the round with Nilfgaard, you basically have control of the game. Because Henselt is slow. If
Yep. So ultimately, we're seeing the Letho coming down to block the Bork. You'll note the specific positioning of the Letho. I could have put him either slightly leaning left or leaning right. I leaned him left because if Roach comes out on the melee row, it'll actually, Letho will trigger after the Roach comes down, which is a huge problem for me because it means my Roach will be banished. So when you're playing against the opponent and you're Lethoing through units, lean him right. If you're doing it your own side, lean him left.
Also, by the way, yes.
And the Letho in this case, this is not generally how you use him in this matchup. It's actually a really niche application. Normally you're using the Letho to try to banish out the siege towers, but it's also a very good Bork counter. Unlike Scorch and Igni, which have opportunities to be used before the Letho can come down, Bork is slow, telegraphed, and it really allows for all of your value to just be locked behind this gold body. And you have plenty of time to set up for that, as I spent the last few turns doing.
not a card I wanted to pull.
I didn't try to kill you.
Not at all, but I will promote these two units.
Roach
Roach actually comes in the right row right now. This is gonna be my only thing that can save me is get above him in value, which is gonna be on its own already really hard. And I know he has two really good cards like Calveit, what's his name? The 10 strength. I forgot his name, but doesn't matter.
10 strength?
Yeah.
It's Kahir.
Yeah, Kahir's. He potentially has some cards like that, which also bring out Roach, and that's value I probably cannot deal with right now, and it's it's gonna be extremely difficult. That's what it's gonna be.
I don't know about that.
Yep.
This is not great.
And I'm personally in a position where I'm ready to pass. I spent the first few turns setting up for, I spent the first turn setting up for round 30, and then as soon as the Bork was dropped, I transitioned into the Letho setup, and then as soon as that threat was over, I slapped down a Regis, and I'm good to get out of this round. I will force the next round with a huge advantage if he can even surpass my score here.
It's not looking like it. There's not a way I can surpass it because my last card is Manticore Venom here, and
I don't know if I have that amount of pull with him is the thing. I think he just kind of does
nothing I can do against that. That
Yep,
Letho.
It's a very. I mean, I think I would personally say that the Calveit deck is very slightly favored in this matchup. It's pretty even, and like I said, it's very nuanced. But I think, despite what intuition may tell you, I think the Calveit deck is a little favored in this matchup.
You're fine. Yeah, he told me this
It
morning.
might be. I mean, it's pretty even. When you're first looking at this matchup, you would really, when playing it as well, you really think like both have a chance. But when you get a setup like that, it's insane. My first turn wasn't the best either, and getting Bork a little late, playing him in a kind of an awkward position. I mean, it was a good position, but then Letho came out, and it was. It was basically my death sentence in that game, but we'll go here in the third game, and this will be the decider.
Yep. So, as always, with this deck, you want to just mulligan your bronzes aggressively. That's kind of the #1 rule. Mulligan bronzes aggressively. Ah, very good.
Now, I don't have the best start here, this best starting hand. It's very much okay. But there's some cards like Reinforced Trebuchet that you definitely want to have in your opening hand, because it's just such an easy-going card to play in the first, especially the opening.
Very proactive. Yeah. It's your typical opener.
I could go here for a Priscilla into a Reinforced Trebuchet. That's probably what I'm gonna do. But I could get something like a field medic that I can't see and will play, or Reaver Scout, and that would be pretty terrible. But I will go for it and try my luck here, because Ooh. I didn't
That
get
is
lucky.
very rough.
Yeah.
So in this case, I'll be looking to try to push ahead a little bit. It's pretty apparent he has a bad hand because he's having to Priscilla for an answer. And when you feel like you're in a very dominant position, you can try to force a bigger advantage. This is something I was pointing out last match. Like, normally going one card down to win the first round is very good, but when you feel like you can do more, you should do more. You should force a position where you have a good carryover into round 2 after winning round 1, or you should aggressively try to force them out of the round by staying ahead of them at every play. Like right now, because I played this operator instead of my normal opener, which is the Rot Tosser, he doesn't even have the opportunity to pass if he even like wanted to consider it.
This is a really tough spot for me now. I can play a few cards, but they're all very mediocre and things you don't really want to do, especially when you have a spy like Cantarella in your hand.
Cantarella can give you a pretty good out. She can draw you the Reinforced Trebuchet, which can just give you more plays. Depends on what you're locking exactly.
Basically what I'm doing now is digging for my Reinforced Trebuchet because I really, really need them. And it's not going so well now. So you can totally justify playing a Cantarella here because I just played one and he's still 1 point ahead with that.
Yep.
So I'm forced to play my Siege Tower, which is a very awkward play, something you don't really want to do. Especially when it's so vulnerable and you have no real setup, it just sits there awkwardly, and now I'm basically setting up my first round very badly, and he's doing it excellently. I'm basically halfly doing it. I'm going into this round and just making his advantage even bigger because I'm just obviously not going to win this round. So unless I pull off some crazy stuff, which is obviously not going to happen here.
Yeah, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to stay on the round here.
Huh.
And the towers get banished. Now, I am conceding having to play around after he passes for this, but the banishing on those units is extremely potent. He's got one siege tower left in his deck, and that's all he'll have access to for the rest of the game. He cannot pull them with Reaver Scouts. He cannot res them with Field Medics. He has one tower left, and he needs to A, draw it, if he doesn't have it already, and B, be able to use it successfully without it itself getting answered. Although, of course, because Letho is a 0 tempo play, in this case a negative tempo play, I do have to, catch up with him.
So I finally had my Reinforced Trebuchet. It's way too late now. This round is already a catastrophe. Taking my two siege towers is huge. The chances of me seeing my last one is slim. It's very slim, especially because I have so much stuff still in my deck. And
yep. So there, I was ahead of them. I was trying to fish in that specific case for a combat engineer. Couldn't find one. Wanted to be able to put some value into the next round while staying ahead of him.
I have committed now, and I decide to still commit even further into this match. And it's basically of one card that I'm having that still gives me that chance of actually having some potential in this match, that keeps me alive, keeps my head above water. Potentially, of course, there's a lot of ways Swim can react to it or can play around it. And
yep. And I've still got the D-Shackles as well. Anyway, I'm seeing on the board state right now, we've got 4 non-gold spies. We've got Cantarella and the 3 bronze ones, ready to be pulled back with Calveit should he push into this round. Forcing out a Henselt here might be proper given that he's really low on siege tower targets, so it looks very irregular, but at the same time, Henselt is a card that loses so much inherent value because the siege tower is already gone. So there's only so much you can do with it at this point.
56.
Yeah, giving me, I mean, I did it now because the probability of me seeing my, or using it properly with my siege tower is very slim. And also now I basically had 5 full targets, and 3 of them were something he could steal with Calveit, which is pretty huge. It's a huge swing in turn 1, and you need to watch out for that. And it's basically kind of countering that, or kind of denying him that strength right now.
Yep. And it's important to stay ahead on tempo. Like, from my perspective, I surged ahead on tempo, playing a really big Impera Brigade, basically forcing him into a situation where if he feels like he can play Bork, I can pass immediately and force 1 card out of him beyond that. And that's a very powerful position to be in when you know that, you know, I mean, the game is all about kind of snowballing your advantage. Like, once you're ahead and you realize you're ahead, there's kind of 2 things. You have to be able to realize when you're dominant, and you have to be able to understand how to take control of that situation. And right now, I want to be ready for a pass, should he drop his last remaining threat here. And in the same vein, I'm going to do basically the same exact play again.
That's huge. That's
Yep.
playing bronzes with that amount of strength. When you're in the position that you can do that, it's you already know that it's huge. It's vulnerable. It's actually not that vulnerable even. But against Henselt, it's good. It's very good. There's very slow ways that Henselt can deal with this, but it's also vulnerable, and Swim can play around it, especially with a pass. Which would be devastating, but it might be the proper way, and it's gonna be forced. And this was the card, of course, and most of you knew that was gonna keep me above water. But of course, Swim passes, which is the obvious choice. My reinforced trebuchets will work against me here, hitting units and making them irregular. Let's hope they don't hit any Impera Brigade here anymore. We don't want it to happen. So basically, what we can decide now is, do we spend 2 cards or 1? We can get ahead here with 1 card and win the round.
Yep.
But do we want to burn
his? Or if you use 2, then the Stennis doesn't get carried over into the next round. And it's all going to depend on your hand. Like, it depends. Like, I mean, your combo is very bisected. So, I mean, at this point, I feel like you kind of have to go for the second card. But at the same time, what options do you have? I mean, if you have a Siri, you know, she has utility in the next round. You're out of your Stennis, so it's really hard to slow the game down in that way. Your options are looking very, very bad. Like, if that Litho comes down on those siege towers, even one siege tower, which happens quite often, that's generally the normal thing to happen. But if he gets 2, it's almost a shutout. And that's one of the biggest things that the Calveit deck has going for it in terms of the Calveit-Henselt matchup. Litho is just completely dominant towards strategies that rely on a few key bronze cards and bringing them back. These are Henselt with the Siege Towers and Herald with the Axemen.
It did hit. It's no big deal. I'll win. It wasn't actually a big deal from the beginning, but it was just like the bronze. I did get rid of his card. I'm 2 cards down, which is huge, but I didn't have my reasons for doing that, and it's kind of obvious. He's keeping nothing, which is very big for me. It's important because playing around that amount of strength is very hard for Henselt, especially without his siege towers or getting a reliable way to pull him. I might have that chance. I probably will, but I will play Siri here, which is something that convinced me to play for the 2 cards, because it will give me some card advantage back, and that was basically the only reason. I couldn't afford anything else, so I am still ahead. He'll need to play 1 more card, which brings me a little bit closer. It's still a big disadvantage, but it might bring me back here in the game.
Yep. A little awkward for me. I would have liked to take that with my last combat engineer or something. I ended up having to take it with Ambassador, but ultimately we're on even cards. He's got a worse hand than me because he's got a bunch of combo pieces that can't find targets. He's got a 6 strength gold, and I'm Nilfgaard, so over the last 4 turns, I've been able to modulate my hand pretty successfully.
So he will have to start, which is very nice for me. In case of like cards like there's no real big end cards here in this matchup, but there's one card that's kind of not gonna get that much use, which I know of, and it's John Calveit. It might still see a lot of use. That's pretty huge. It's very huge even. It's very annoying.
Yep. Ooh. And as always, the proactive raw tossers just preemptively shut down his options. He's staring at a hand right now and not too sure what to do with it. I mean, he's definitely looking at field medics to bring back, cards that are just going to be dying right away. Very awkward. Although medics can give you a bit more of a choice. Now his graveyard is just flooded with my spies, so he has a high chance of hitting an ambassador, which could go extremely poorly for him, because if it hits the cow carcass, he's gaining nothing from that, and if he hits the Joachim de Wet, he is giving me power.
Is it gonna happen? It's a risky play.
He's hoping for the field medic at this point. Ends up buffing the Joachim, and that's just really, really hard to come back from.
And suddenly, when I said this John Calveit is not gonna be that big of a deal, suddenly it's one of the biggest swing. It's gonna be one of the deciders in this third round here. And
yep. John Calveit's always going to be strong. If you can save him for late, that's even better. I mean, I always had the Cancerilla going after round 1, since I cloned it with the operator and never used the second one. You always expect the Joachim de Wet coming down, which already just enables the Calveit to hit 10 points by itself.
And eventually the Roach comes to protect him, and I could have avoided that whole scenario.
Yep, and we're seeing the Calveit coming out a little bit early. In that specific case, I could have used it very aggressively on the Joachim de Wet before even playing the Cantarella down. I elected in this case to hold off a bit because I specifically have Dimeridium Shackles, which means that even if he promotes the Joachim de Wet very early, I can still demote it, ready to steal it again.
And I did see my Reinforced Siege Tower again when I was talking about... Oh, he did lock in, which is... There's no way for me to get back from this in any way. I mean, there might be a way, but there's no way.
This deck, it's very strange in that it's very, very powerful, but also very, very controlling. Like Letho, that one card, Letho, one of Nilfgaard's best cards, very, very powerful in what it can just shut down. Like, it just completely shuts down so many strategies.
Do you want to pull out the deck?
And even this was a huge card, the Shani, huge, but it still isn't even close to what I need. This Combat Engineer, if cards like this keep coming out, there might be a very, very slim chance, but it's not a big one, and yeah. I need a much bigger threat to hold on to now than just that, because it's not looking good at all. And I decided to promote this row because Roach has so much strength and I don't want to lose that. If there was a possible way to lose that, there's probably not, but this, yeah, a card like Vilgefortz is now coming out like that is 8 strength plus a card he can play like Zoltan is, yeah, it's basically the game decider. There were a lot of things, and that's what I like about this matchup. There were so many decisions, small decisions, especially in that first round. So many nuances that I could take, and that I could decide to leave or not leave, and it's even treasoning that's.
Yep. Kind of close there at the end, honestly. My hand was quite bricked. I had some bad draws. The Combat Engineer and the Treason top decks almost screwed me. Obviously, I was able to pull the Zoltan Animal Tamer with the Vilgefortz, which was a pretty strong play that furthermore enabled my Treason to actually have any value at all. But even with my Nilfgaard passive, I was having a very awkward round 3 hand there. But the dominant shutout of round 1 and the carryover value is just, it's just more than he can handle.
Yeah, it was so much, the very awkward round 1 without Reinforced Trebuchet, and then trying to play something else and getting a promo from Priscilla was really awkward. But I still had a chance. I did played that first round out in a very awkward way, but it did get me. It did get me the first round with a very big card disadvantage. But that second round went very well then, as I planned, and then the third round should have been better. If he didn't, I think if he didn't have the lock there, I would have maybe gotten it.
It would have been very, very close.
Yeah.
Especially also if I hadn't pulled the Zoltan Animal Tamer off the Builder Forts. In addition to that would have been pretty brutal on my part. If my hand was even a little bit worse, it could have been a lot awkward. Ultimately, the matchup's going to come down to some very powerful gold cards. Like, if the Nilfgaard player draws Letho, that can be just game-winning. If the Northern Realms player, or the Henselt player in this case, ends up drawing the Bork or the Villain Tretmirth, that is often going to be majorly, massively swinging and game-changing.
Yeah, both cards are. I mean, the gold cards in this matchup are so very important. I mean, not all of them, of course, but some of them are just huge. Like that Shani. If I didn't have that, I would have I wouldn't have even been close to the amount of strength that I gained there. But it's all about setup. It's all about making the right decisions. Do you really want that first round? One of the probably the most important round in the matchup. A very difficult matchup too, especially when your opponent can get his game plan off in turn 1. It makes it really difficult because you're not in control, and he will pass whenever he wants to pass.
I mean, for sure, as the Henselt player, like, you should expect to not be able to win that round 1 unless you commit very hard for it, and the Calveit player has a slightly suboptimal hand. If you see the operator not come down on the Cantarella, you might be able to put extra resources into round 1 and try to take it, but otherwise, it's a very, very hard round 1 to figure out a way to effectively shut down out of the Nilfgaard player's hands. And
it's also a deck that doesn't see that much play. It does have a big weakness, and that's monsters, of course. But overall, I think it looks like a very fun deck to play, and it's definitely very strong.
Oh yeah, lot of nuance to this one. Very underrated deck.
It can definitely take a few opponents by surprise that aren't prepared for this, for example. If you play it skillfully, you can definitely take some Henselt players by surprise, like happened to me.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't playing around the Letho properly. They might not be playing around, well, I mean, not just the Letho on the Siege Towers, but also the Letho coming down to block the Bork as well. The Letho is a card that a lot of people aren't playing around properly right now, and it's just one of the most powerhouse golds in the game. It's very, very strong. It
can disable, I mean, if you are working around a bronze card, for example, like Axeman, it's out of the game. You cannot use it anymore because it banishes it. I mean, Northern Realms has that, and Skellige, they can revive it if it's gone, but banishing it is huge, and not being able, I mean, if you had enough of banishing two of my 3 units, and even though I could pull my 3rd, it wasn't enough by far, because you still had more resources to disable my vitally important cards. And
yeah, Letho's a card. It's very, very hard to press to find less than, say, 10 value, except against Squirtle, which is one of the reasons why it's not so common in the meta, and maybe even Nilfgaard as a whole as well.
It's also a card you don't know. You just don't see coming. You're not playing around that card because you're not thinking about Letho. You're not actively thinking, he could play Letho here and kill all that. You're just thinking, how will I get my value? How will I set up my round? And then suddenly your Letho comes in and you don't see it coming. So yeah, that was the first episode of our series. We're gonna do this more, hopefully once a week, and it'll be different decks, different players, and just
we'll try to find a relatively either a common meta matchup, something hopefully not too meta, a nice balance between 2 strong decks. And maybe we'll pick some decks that we think are a little bit underrated and deserve a little more attention, and that you might be able to really, really get an edge by playing because they'll come as slightly of a surprise factor.
My name was Ruben.
And mine still is Swim.
And we're from the Gentleman, and we wish you good luck in your games.
Bye!